السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وصلى الله تبارك وتعالى وسلم على سيدنا محمد سيدنا وسندنا وحبيبنا وشفيعنا ومولانا صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه وأزواجه وذرياته وأهل بيته ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين وسلم تسليما كثيرا كثيرا وبعد. I apologize and ask for your forgiveness for being on a couple of minutes late. The video that's been cutting out, I've been trying to troubleshoot it and look for some alternatives and having compatibility issues. So inshallah, hopefully the video doesn't cut out again today like it has after about 20 minutes in the past. But inshallah, we're we're trying our best, and my IT department here in Chicago is working around the clock to find you a solution. There is no IT department; it's just me. But inshallah, again, I ask for your forgiveness and for your patience. So we continue with where we left off. There are a couple of anecdotes about the story, the life of Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu ta'ala anhu, that we had left off, that we didn't have time to finish. And I think we're going to go ahead and read some of those before starting the biography of Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu ta'ala anhu. Inshallah, hopefully they'll be of some benefit, and they'll be instructive, and hopefully we'll enjoy them also. They'll cool the hearts as well. Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu once dispatched an army under the command of Sariya radiallahu anhu. The enemy had concealed a group of their men behind a mountain. And this is, by the way, from very far away. This ambush that the enemy concealed was somewhere in Iran. The enemy had concealed a group of men behind a mountain. When the Muslim army was about to be entrapped, meaning walk into the trap, Sariya radiallahu anhu heard the voice of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu saying, Ya Sariyatul Jabal, O Sariya, pay attention to the mountain pass. O Sariya, pay attention to the mountain pass. Hearing this command, Sariya was alerted, and he took the necessary precautions to avert what would have been a disaster for the Muslim army. Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, while delivering the Jummah khutbah, was appraised through supernatural means of the state of the Muslim army. Hence, he called out to Sariya from the middle of the Friday prayer, commanding him from over 1,000 miles away. By the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the voice of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu reached the ears of Sariya. And this is one of the miracles of Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu ta'ala anhu, and it was, witness was borne to it by all of those who were there in the Friday prayer, as well as the army that heard his voice and averted walking into an ambush. And people probably, nowadays, skepticism is considered to be a healthy trait, and I think in general it is. One thing I would, I guess, proffer for the skeptic who balks at hearing a story like this is that they actually did end up conquering all of Persia. Arabia was a backwater. We have very few historical sources about it because very few people even knew how to read. They say in Makkah Mukarramah, which is the biggest city in the Arabian Peninsula, in the inner Arabian Peninsula, maybe with the exception of Sana'a in Yemen, only 10 people knew how to read, before the advent of Islam. And for such a group of people who there's barely any even historical record of them having existed before, so primitive was their existence, for them to go and knock heads with the two premier world empires of the time, and to displace one of them, the Romans, and to completely replace the other, which is the Persians, was nothing short of supernatural. And it's interesting, actually, Christianity, the historians of Christianity actually cite as a proof of Christianity's truth claim that the hand of providence caused it to spread throughout the entire world. And so what you see is that Christians, the people who carry the teachings of Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam in whatever form there is, there's still barakah in it, there's still khair in it, there's so much good in it. And they struggled a lot until the Roman Emperor Constantine will accept Christianity. And there are three versions of the story about his conversion to Christianity. But until that point, really, the Christians struggled a lot, and they gave many sacrifices. Many times they were, put to death or put to torment, and they were definitely not embraced with open arms by everybody in the Roman Empire at first. But after Constantine's conversion, it essentially becomes the state religion of the Roman Empire, and then on the wings of the Roman Empire, then it spreads to the world. If the conversion of Constantine over 300 years after Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam is a sign of the providential favor upon Christianity, then the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, literally within their own lifetimes, unseating the Persians and the Romans, are even more superlative, or a superlative example, even more intense than the example of the disciples of Christ toiling for several centuries in bringing his good and great message to the world. And so that wasn't something that anyone could do, because if anyone could have done it, everyone would have done it. They had help. They had help from Allah Ta'ala. Allah Ta'ala gave them supernatural means through which they were able to affect their spread, and through which they were able to affect bringing the different nations of the earth under the order of the deen. And this is a proof. This small story is a proof. So if someone wishes to balk at it, let them balk. But the fact of the matter is that the Sasanian Persian Empire died and never came back. And the Romans were never able to rule over Syria again. They were never able to rule over Jerusalem again. They were never able to rule over Egypt again. They were never able to rule over, over any of those places ever again. And they've been thoroughly displaced, not only politically but also culturally and spiritually. They've been displaced by Islam. So we continue. Second story to share is with regards to something we mentioned from before, that Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, he took a personal interest in making sure everybody in Medina Munawwara was taken care of and was in a good state. He took it as his personal responsibility as leader. And this is unfortunately a concept of leadership that people have lost from their popular and collective consciousness. That when you're a leader, people think that, oh, everybody will respect you, everybody will listen to what you have to say, everybody will kowtow to you, everybody will treat you like a big shot. And that's not the point of leadership. If that's the point of leadership, then leadership is a wholly and 100% and completely evil thing that we don't need. Everyone should be treated the same. If anything, somebody should be treated with respect based on what positive contribution they have in society, not for any other reason other than that. And the leadership, the model of leadership brought by the Prophet ﷺ is what? Sayyidul Qawmi yukhadimuhum. Look at who's the one who's actually hustling and doing something. Who's the one who's teaching, who's the one solving people's problems, who's the one settling people's disputes, who's the one who making people's lives better. That's the person who should be leader. And that was a back-breaking responsibility. And Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, when he was Amir al-Mu'mineen, when he became Khalifa, he took that very seriously. And so during the day he would do his work, and then in the night he would go out at night. And you have to understand, like I said, Arabia was literally was a primitive civilization at the time. Even after their conquest, Arabia, it was a civilization that was not super highly developed. They will go to Iraq and acculturate to the civilization of the Persians. They will go to Syria and acculturate and acclimatize themselves to the civilization of the Romans, and they'll go to Egypt and they'll acclimatize themselves to the civilization of the Greeks who ruled Egypt before the conquest, and the Egyptian civilization as well, Andalusia to Spain. And they will adopt and make their own, fuse the culture of being Arab with the culture of the local society. But in Arabia, things were relatively underdeveloped, even during the time of the reign of the Khulafa. And then thereafter, the actual caliphate of the capital of the caliphate will be moved out of the Arabian Peninsula, and Arabia will stay kind of like a backwater place in the even in the Muslim world. And so he would go out at night, and there's no street lights. And people, people can't see. People have no idea who is who. Perhaps people in Medina Munawwara themselves all haven't seen Sayyidina Umar, don't know what he looks like. So he would go out at night under the cover of darkness. No one knows who he is, and he just inspect and see what's going on in the city of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In one of these excursions to the streets of Medina Tayyiba, the pure, after considerable trudging, he sat down tired, leaning against the wall, and he heard a woman instructing her daughter to add water to the milk. The daughter responded that the Amir al-Mu'mineen Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu has issued an instruction prohibiting watering down milk with water, what we call nowadays skim milk. He said no. He said sell the milk pure, and then if people can water it down if they want to on their own. But if you sell it pure, at least people know exactly what they're getting. Otherwise, when you water it down, someone may put more water in it, someone may put less water in it. It's difficult to tell. It introduces gharar, or some sort of like shadiness in the transaction. And so the mother ordered the daughter to add the milk, saying that Amir al-Mu'mineen is not present to see this happening right now. And what she didn't know is that the Amir al-Mu'mineen was actually present seeing it. And the daughter says, by Allah, I'll never do so. And this is it's a beautiful story that the next day, the Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, he asked his sons, which of you is ready to marry? And one of his sons said, me, a son by the name of Hafs, a son by the name of Asim. And so the next day, Sayyidina Umar goes to the same house, and unbeknownst to that woman, he asked, do you have a daughter? I wish to propose marriage to your house from my house. And this is like a milkmaid of Medina. And they were obviously overjoyed that the son of the Amir al-Mu'mineen, the son of the Khalifa, is going to marry our daughter, a woman who's relatively unknown and not ostensibly of a prominent house. And Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu didn't house schmouse. He didn't care about any of those things. All he cared about is Allah Ta'ala, and all he cared about was making Allah happy, and all he cared about was piety and righteousness. And so he cast his lot in with that girl who had enough good sense to say Allah is watching, even if the Amir al-Mu'mineen can't see. And that daughter will end up becoming the grandmother of Umar bin Abdul Aziz, the righteous Khalifa, who inshallah maybe we'll get a chance to hear about his story a little bit later. But these night excursions of Sayyidina Umar were very, very well known. One day he went out at night and he heard the cry of children in the house, and he knocked on the door, and he said, "Oh, slave woman of Allah, why is your house in such chaos and disarray?" She says that times have become tough, and the treasury is not taking care of us, and I'm raising these children alone, and I have nothing to give them. This is the second night in a row. I'm just boiling water in the pot and stirring the pot until the children go to sleep, so that they don't cry if they know that there's nothing to eat. And our situation is bad. Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, not only did he go to the Baytul Mal, he went to the treasury and got a sack of grain. But he carried it himself. The worker in the treasury said, I'll carry it for you. He says, you'll carry it for me in this world. Who's going to carry it for me on the day of judgment, when this woman complains that no one took care of her? And so he carried the huge sack of grain with him. Not only did he deliver it to the house, he actually cooked the food and served it to the children himself. And then he felt acquitted of his responsibility, that he felt that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he'd done something sufficient to assuage his fear of Allah's punishment on the day of judgment, because these children were not being taken care of, and this single mother was not being taken care of. There was one story such, it's mentioned by Ibn Allan in his commentary on the Riyadh al-Salihin with the sanad from the Muhaddithin, that one night Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, Zubair bin Awam noticed that he slipped out of the house at night, and he was wondering, what is he doing? They used to keep, the Sahaba radiallahu anhum loved each other, they knew each other well, but they used to keep each other in check also. They used to function by the, not to quote Ronald Reagan in Ramadan, but the trust but verify model. And so it's a kind of a shady thing to leave your house at night, without telling anybody. And so he kind of followed him just to see what is he doing, what's going on. He's our leader. We should just, know what's going on. So he followed Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu out of the house when he left at night, just to see what he was doing. And what ends up happening is that he sees him going into a house, and then he comes out of that house several hours later. And so during the daytime, Sayyidina Zubair bin Awam radiallahu anhu, he knocks on the door, and he says, who is this man who comes to you? An old woman says, come in. And so he opens the door and goes in, and he finds an old woman who is blind and who is bedridden. She cannot see, and she cannot get up from her bed. She's disabled. And so he asks, I just wanted to ask you, who is this person who comes to your house at night, and what does he come to do? She says, oh no, there's a nice young man. My husband died. I'm a widow, and there's a nice young man. He comes to my house, and he cleans it up for me. And he asks me if I need anything, and if I need anything, he'll go get it for me. He just, make sure that I'm okay. And she has no idea who it is. She has no idea. She just thinks some young man who's just, doing his good deed for the day. And so Sayyidina Zubair bin Awam radiallahu anhu is like overwhelmed. He goes to Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu and he says, this thing, like I followed you and I went to this house and I find that you're doing this thing. He says that why, it's a good deed, but you're probably distracted with the work of the, running the affairs of the Muslims. Why don't we find someone else, we'll appoint them to take care of this woman on your behalf? He says, Zubair, you don't understand. He says that just like you were wondering what I was doing and you wanted to, keep an eye on me, just make sure that I'm, on the up and up and investigate, see what's going on. He says, just like that, once I saw Abu Bakr leave his house in the middle of the night, and I wondered, where is he going? And then I also knocked and asked, what's going on? And just like that, I saw that he used to come and do this service for this old woman. And just like that, he says, now that Abu Bakr has passed, the thing that was worthy of Abu Bakr to do, I want to carry it on myself. I don't want to give it away to somebody else. I feel like a duty that I should attend to this myself. So he used to do things like this. And the only person who would do something like that is someone who fears Allah Ta'ala and visualizes and sees very clearly that the day of judgment is going to happen, and a person has to have something that they can show Allah Ta'ala that they prepared for that day. And it shows that Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab, like yesterday near the end of our our session, we talked about that the people were afraid that he would be really harsh, and he said that I'll be soft with you. He was very soft in his caliphate. He was very soft with people, and his heart was filled with mercy. He would often weep for them, and he would be very careful not to put undue hardship or burden on them. Sayyidina Abdullah bin Imran bin Hafs narrates that once Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu loaded on his back a goatskin water bag full of water. When people made some comments in this regard, Sayyidina Umar said, my nafs appeared pleasing to me, therefore I desired to disgrace it. So carrying water is very heavy. For those of us who have ever, like when I lived in the Badia, you have to get like water from the well and carry it around. Water is really heavy. And the goatskin bag, what they call a qirba. Girba is, that's how they used to have cold water in the old days, because they didn't have refrigerators. So what they do is they'll take a goat or take an animal and they'll skin it in such a way that they don't cut it down the middle, but they'll skin it from the inside, so that the shape of the animal is still intact. And then the skin where the legs are, they kind of tie it to something, and where the neck is, the skin is also like intact, and they just put like a wika, like a drawstring around it. And mashallah, when we were studying in Mauritania and the Badia, we used to drink from the girba, and it's kind of weird, you're like I don't want to drink water out of a goat. It's kind of weird. But then you get thirsty and the water is nice and cool. And even when they pour it out, they'll tie the drawstring and they'll tip it over a little bit and the water comes out nice and cool. It takes a little bit of color from the hide, which looks kind of gross at first, but you get used to it. It doesn't change the taste at all. Maybe one or two hairs from the hide will fall into it. But because the hide is semi-permeable, a little bit of water moisture will get out, and when the wind blows, it evaporates, and it actually keeps the water cool inside. And so carrying a water skin filled with water is not like the funnest thing in the world. It's very heavy and it's going to be a little bit slimy and it's kind of disgusting. And so he said that I felt proud of myself, and then I wanted to quash that pride inside of me. So I thought I'll carry this goat skin for somebody in order to kind of bust my own ego down a couple of notches and bring it back to where it belongs. These are the ways that the great people of the past became great, is by keeping their egos in check. Now we think we're going to become great by acting like we're great, and someone who acts like they're great is not great. Someone who thinks they're special isn't special. The one who knows that they're not special, that person is very special. That person is very special. The person who can abase his ego, that person really, the Johar and the pure gem of undivided essence of greatness has entered into that person's heart. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the tawfiq of humbling ourselves like the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, rather than being arrogant like Iblis. Wal-'iyadhu billah, la'anahullah. Once his son donning beautiful clothes came to him. Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu struck him with his lash, and the boy cried. Sayyidina Hafsa radiallahu anha asked for the reason of the beating. Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu said he was proud of himself, and I desired him to understand that his ego is contemptible. Sayyidina Abbas radiallahu anhu narrates, a year after Sayyidina Umar's demise, I made dua, I prayed to Allah for Umar to appear in my dream. Abbas who is the uncle of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he was the nearest and the closest relative of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam after his death. He says that after a year after Umar passed from this world, I prayed to Allah Ta'ala, I made dua for Umar to appear in my dream. Thus after a year I saw him in a dream wiping perspiration from his forehead. May my father and mother be sacrificed for you, O Amir al-Mu'mineen. What is this condition? He replied, I have just now been released from reckoning. I was close to destruction, but I found Allah Ta'ala to be most merciful. And that's a scary reminder for us, that if this is the remark that Sayyidina Umar would make, then all of us are far more in need of the mercy of Allah Ta'ala, and should be more keen in asking for it. And Allah Ta'ala give us from His mercy. His mercy knows no bounds. Kataba ala nafsihi rahma. He's the one who fixed as a commandment over himself mercy, that we should constantly be seeking it and asking for it. Once when Umar saw radiallahu anhu an intoxicated man, he desired to punish the man, but the man insulted him. Thereupon Sayyidina Umar went away. When he was asked the reason of allowing the man to go free in spite of the insults, he said, his insults angered me. If I had punished him, my ego too would have had a share therein. I do not approve of punishing every or any Muslim for the sake of the desires of my ego. When Sayyidina Umar would see a man dressed in garments too fine, he would tell him, leave the fine garments for the women. Meaning this is not a sign of your manliness. And this is something I think our brothers, including myself, we all need to be reminded as well, that the beauty of a man is in his strength. It's not in prettying himself up. Otherwise, we have this kind of trend amongst people of being like Metro or whatever, and it's fine. You should look nice, neat, trimmed, groomed, clean, but over embellishing yourself is not becoming of a man, and it's not becoming of a Muslim man in particular. By the way, right now I'm sensing, because we went over I think 23 minutes or so in our live cast, the video feed from my side has cut out, and I don't know if it's cut out from your side, so I suspect that it may be on still. So if somebody is listening, if anyone is listening in the comment section, maybe you can tell me if the video is still coming through on your side, and I'll just continue without the feed showing up on my side. If I don't hear from anyone, then I'll drop the feed, and then we'll start a new one, inshallah. So if anyone's listening, maybe you could type in the comment section whether or not you're actually getting anything on the video feed on your side. Okay, inshallah. Since I'm not seeing any comments, inshallah, I'm just going to restart it. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Yeah, so the comments, the people who said that in the comment section that the feed is still on, those comments weren't coming through, but I guess the video feed was still going through, because once I cut the live feed and then went back to the page, then I saw that the comments were showing up, but they weren't showing up from before. So next time this happens, inshallah, I'm just going to go ahead and just power through the rest of the session, inshallah, without trying to bisect our session. But we continue, inshallah. His famous dua, radiallahu anhu, was, "Oh Allah, grant me that I should die in the city of your messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and let me die the death of a martyr." And this was a dua that would perplex people, because Medina was a safe and secure place, whereas martyrdom was oftentimes in the battlefield. And so people wondered, how is it going to be possible Allah Ta'ala protect Medina Munawwara from ever seeing any fighting, ever. And Allah granted him his wish, that the Magian slave, Zoroastrian slave, Abu Lu'lu' Firoz, assassinated him in Medina Munawwara. So he was given the honor of passing and being buried next to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in Medina Munawwara, as well as dying as a shaheed, dying as a martyr, because of the way he was assassinated. How he would attain martyrdom in Allah's path while residing in Medina, then the capital of Islam, was a mystery. However, it was not difficult for Allah Ta'ala, and Allah Ta'ala fulfilled his prayer. Once, when the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam permitted Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu to go on Umrah, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to him, this is a hadith also narrated in it's a hadith narrated in the the books of hadith, but it's also included in the Riyadh al-Salihin, meaning it's not all that difficult to find. That the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that that Sayyidina Umar asked him, do I have permission to go to Makkah Mukarramah and make Umrah? And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave him permission and said, keep me in your du'as, also my brother. He said to him, Akhi, my brother. And Sayyidina Umar became so happy that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would say that to him. And so that's the reason that it seems almost like a non-event, because it's something that we say to one another so frequently. But that hadith, he would fondly recall it to people because of his intense joy that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, my brother, to him. It was Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu's practice to visit the butcher with his lash in hand. If he saw someone purchasing meat on 2 consecutive days, he would tell him, can't you keep your stomach empty for the sake of your neighbors and relatives? By this statement, he implied that one should tend to the needs of his neighbors and not be concerned selfishly for their own needs only. Meaning what? Meaning that just because you have enough money to buy something expensive, he knew that there were still people in the city that were poor, and so he'd remind them, like, don't ingratiate yourself to like the maximum degree and then like leave your brothers hanging in a lurch. And this also is a very it's an important life lesson. I think if any kids are listening, if there's any families that are listening, they'll probably not be excited that I'm about to say this, but this is one reason I think it's good, like, even if you have a big house, the siblings should have to like share a room, because this whole like idea of like the way people used to live together and still live together in even here in America and in other places in the world, they had to interact with another human being, see what makes them happy, see what makes them sad, learn how to not upset them, learn how to make them happy, learn how to get along, learn how to sympathize with another person. Whereas like if everybody is sitting in their own room and they have their own things and they have their own computer and they have their own phone and they have their own whatever, and they don't have to interact with people. When they do finally interact with people, they lose the ability to be, to show any sympathy anymore, and that's one of the things that scares me. It's one of the things that scares me is that, like, soldiers in the army and people in the government and people who make decisions on behalf of society, when those people, they themselves don't have family, when those people, they don't themselves have like people that they interact with regularly, that are poor or that are underprivileged or that have some issues, they lose the feeling of what that feels like. And then they will make decisions with a great amount of callousness inside of them. And Sayyidina Umar was not a callous person. Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu was not a callous person. When people, there's an author I read, or I heard from one of the muhaddithin of Damascus, Sheikh. He's not even a muhaddith, he's a faqih, Sheikh Samir al-Nas. He comes and visits. He's a medical doctor, but he's a qari of the Qira'at Ashara, master qari of Damascus, and he used to teach Hanafi fiqh. He used to teach the master book of Hanafi fiqh, the Hidayah, in the Ma'had al-Fath, one of the great madaris of Damascus. He mentioned this. He mentioned that Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, his softness and his sympathy for the common people was such that if a battle was taking place, he would be very consumed with tension with regards to knowing what the outcome of that battle was. And he would pace back and forth, because Medina Munawwara, like all old cities, it had different gates that people would enter from. So he'd pace back and forth in front of the gate that faced the road to the land where that battle was happening, so that when the news of the outcome of the battle would reach Medina Munawwara, it would come to him immediately without delay. And so inevitably, when the news of victory would come back, because Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, Allah Ta'ala blessed him with futuhat, Allah Ta'ala blessed him. Those were pious people. They feared Allah Ta'ala. Allah Ta'ala opened the doors of victory for them. That when Allah Ta'ala, gave them the news of victory, and the Bashir, the herald, bearing the glad tidings of victory from Allah would arrive, the first question that Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu would ask is what? He'd ask, Man istashhada? Who is the one who gave their life as a martyr in the path of Allah Ta'ala in this battle? Who didn't make it? And so the Bashir, the herald, would say, so and so, the son of so and so, gave his life in the path of Allah. So and so, the son of so and so, gave his life in the path of Allah. So and so, the son of so and so, gave his life in the path of Allah. وَخَلْقٌ كَثِيرٌ لَا يَعْلَمُهُمْ أَمِيرُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. He says, a great number of people that the Amir al-Mu'mineen doesn't know personally. And so Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu would begin to weep, and he would say that what does it harm them that Allah knows who they are? What does it harm them that Allah knows who they are and Umar doesn't know who they are? And he would go and actually visit the houses of those orphans whose fathers didn't make it. He would hold their children and cry with them. Why? He was not a callous person. He used to feel for the pain of other people. So this is why it's not just a matter of walking around with a lash in your hand and like harassing people or whatever. His entire point in reminding people was, what is it? There's still people in this Medina who are hungry. Like, how dare you ingratiate yourself to such a high level while there are people who actually don't even have anything to eat right now. And that's something we need to learn. We need to teach those lessons. Unfortunately, because the way that modern life has become, our own kids don't even know to ask about their own brother or their own sister. Is that person happy or not? Are they sad? Are they in pain? Are they sick? Are they are they hungry? They fight each other you have to be like, look, what are you going to do? like, parents, you should say this to you tell your children, what are you going to do when I die? Are you guys going to kill each other? Are you going to disown each other? If there's only, there's 4 of you and only 3 loaves of bread, what are you going to fight each other for it? Teach these lessons to them. We got to teach these lessons to them. We got to tell them the stories. Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, the companions radiallahu anhum in general, right? This is a story about 3 companions that it's a narration. It's not just like a tall tale, that 3 of them are dying in the battlefield. Mumarrida, the nurse, brings water to one of them, and he says, my brother so and so fell on the battlefield as well. He needs it more than me. Go to him. And then the second one says, my brother so and so, he also fell on the battlefield, he needs the water right now more than me, go to him. And she goes to the third brother, and he is like, not like blood brothers, like brothers in Islam. She goes to the third one and says, and brings him the water, and he's dying, and he literally dies right in front of her eyes. And then she goes back to the second one, and he's already passed away. And she goes back to the first one, he already passed away. Can you imagine what love those people had for one another? And how are we going to solve any problems? How are we going to solve any problems in the world? How are we going to make a masjid that's worth going to? How are we going to have an Islam that's worth being a part of if we don't have love for each other? The Prophet ﷺ says that you're not going to enter Jannah until you believe, and you're not going to believe until you love one another. How can you love one another if you're busy, living it up, and your brothers and sisters don't even have anything to drink? And this is not to guilt trip people. Alhamdulillah, if you're successful, you worked hard, you're educated, whatever, even you didn't work hard, your daddy's rich, right? No one's guilt tripping. Allah barakallahu lakum fi amwalikum wa ahlikum. Allah ta'ala put barakah for you in your money, in your wealth, and in your family. Allah keep you happy. Allah keep you beautiful. Allah keep you young. Allah keep you healthy. Everything. But just it's kind of bogus. Just peace out and not care about what's going on in your neighborhood. Not bother to see what's happening in the house next door to you, and like what's happening with your cousins, and what's happening with your siblings. You should find out about it. And if you can't feed the entire world, at least like feed someone. And be happy about it. I mean, there's few joys that will give you a more lasting and a more proper type of happiness than that. And this is the reason that telling these stories is really important. It's really important because we see those people actually live that life, and we saw it's not stupidity. It is actually the thing that made them successful. They were successful people. We're not successful people like the way they were. Our success is like being able to pay off a single family house, or to be able to buy like a car that's slightly nicer than a Toyota Camry or a Honda Accord. Then we say, oh, so and so is successful, right? They were successful as in like they literally changed the world for the better. People name their children after them, because of the great good that they brought into the world, and the honor and nobility with which they lived. So, we should also tell these stories in order to imbibe some of that success. Who knows, maybe one of us will also change the world for the better, or some of us will get together, which is even better, and together we'll change the world for a better place. If you can bring food into the home of a hungry person, you've changed the world for the better. You've made the world a better place. Many times when he desired to eat something, because of that desire, he would delay it for a year just to crush his nafs, just to crush his ego. And whenever he passed by a garbage dump, he would say, "This is your world, for whose greed and desire you are perishing." So he would see the garbage dump, that all of the things in the garbage dump were all things that people at one time desired, and would have been happy to kill each other for, and would have been happy to cut off each other for, and would have been happy to push each other out of the way for. He says, this is the world for which you cry at night, and which you die. This is it. He would look at the garbage, and he would say that to himself. These are people of basira, they're people of insight. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us from what they had. Just a couple of comments, because I think we're not going to be able to do justice to Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu anhu if we start his biography right now. So inshallah we'll start it tomorrow. Just a closing comment, that he knew Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu wasn't just a man who's just pious because he's a nice guy, but he knew the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam taught them how to seek the help of Allah and how to receive it, how to actually get results. And so one of the things that Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, he would write frequently to his commanders and his governors, and to the armies that were to engage the enemy in battle. He would tell those armies, he said, the night before battle, I want the commanders to go through the army, tent by tent, and see, are the people praying at night? Are the people reading Quran? Are the people making dua? Are the people busy in the worship of Allah Ta'ala? If they are, then good, and if they're not, then throw them out of the army, because those are the ones because of whom we're going to lose. Those are the ones because of whom we are going to lose the help of Allah Ta'ala. Because if we're not concerned with the worship of Allah, and they're not concerned with the worship of Allah, then how is the battle? It's just two armies, whichever one has more swords and bigger weapons, they're just going to crush the other one, and that's it. We lose the help of Allah Ta'ala because of that. if we are people who walk the walk that we talk. Because we have big speeches and big words that we learned from our elders, but oftentimes we don't bring those things into our lives, into practice. If we're just talking smack and we don't have any reality to back it up, then that help from Allah Ta'ala is going to be pulled from underneath us. You know, that power that let us stand, it will be pulled from underneath us. And oftentimes nowadays there are people, they have a crooked type of understanding. They think like, oh well, you know, we need more money and we need this, we need that. The Muslim world is the richest part of the world. The Muslim world is the rich. Muslim countries are wealthy. Even poor Muslim countries have ridiculous amounts of wealth in them. You know, Indonesia, which is the most populous Muslim country in the world, it's the only country that doesn't have to import anything. It literally produces everything. I think like chromium is the only one commodity that they don't have inside of their lands. Our lands are filled with wealth, and Allah gave us everything. It's not money that made this thing. It's not numbers that made this thing. How many times the Muslims were outnumbered, Allah gave them victory. How many times they had even numbers and they got trounced. It's not numbers that makes this thing. It's not money that makes this thing. It's not power. It's not weapons. It's nothing. It's a secret that's between the Lord and the slave, that if you worship Him and nobody else than Him, and you acquit yourself of your ego's share from this world, Allah Ta'ala will use you in order to establish a greater harmony and a greater order in this world. And if you're just a chimpanzee like everybody else is, then go ahead and duke it out and see where it takes you. Allah Ta'ala protect us from such an existence. Inshallah. With that awkward note, inshallah, I will let everybody prepare for their iftar. And we ask Allah Ta'ala to be pleased with our forefathers and increase their rank and give some piece of their piety and righteousness to us as well, and that we can benefit from it and emulate it in this world, and that Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala unite us with them because of how much we love them. Allah unite us with them on the Day of Judgment, and also give us salvation on the heels of theirs. وصلى الله تبارك وتعالى وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.